Lena and Mark thought a simple sleepover at their friend's house would be fun, just movies, popcorn, and laughter. But when the lights flickered and shadows started moving on their own, they realized something in the house wasn't just waiting, it was watching. And by the time the night was over, what they saw in the mirror wasn't them anymore. It started as an ordinary Friday night, the kind I had been looking forward to all week. I had packed my backpack carefully, stuffing it with snacks, a change of clothes, and a few movies I thought would keep us entertained until sunrise. The house we were visiting belonged to my friend, and it always felt warm and inviting, with cozy lights and the faint smell of vanilla from the candles her mom kept lit. At first, everything seemed perfect. We laughed, played games, and told silly stories that made our stomachs ache from laughing too much. I felt safe, surrounded by familiar voices and the comfortable clutter of the living room, bin bags, blankets, and half-empty bowls of popcorn. But as the night wore on, I began noticing small things that made my stomach twist. Shadows in the corners seemed longer than they should be, stretching across the walls like dark fingers. The clock ticked steadily, but every time I glanced at it, it felt like time was moving slower, dragging me deeper into a strange, quiet tension I couldn't explain. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves or imagination. Maybe it was the thrill of being away from my parents for the first time, the thrill of a night that felt like freedom, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I tried to focus on the movies, burying myself in the flickering images on the screen. The room was cozy, the others laughing and commenting on every scene, but I kept catching glimpses of movement in the corner of my eyes. A shadow would flit past the edge of my vision, too fast and deliberate to be my mind playing tricks. I'd turn my head, expecting to see a friend sneaking up or a pet moving, but there was nothing. The empty corners stared back at me like silent witnesses to something I couldn't yet understand. Then I noticed the hallway mirror. I had walked past it a dozen times that evening, and each time I had barely paid attention. But now, as I passed again, I froze. My reflection wasn't moving quite like I was. For a brief heart-stopping moment, it seemed to lag behind me, a second too slow in mirroring my movements. My pulse raced, and I took a cautious step back. The hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes your thoughts echo too loudly. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe the dim lighting, the shadows of the furniture, or the flickering candlelight had played tricks on me. But then I noticed something else. The reflection blinked, just once, when I hadn't. My fingers trembled as I reached out to touch the mirror, half expecting my hand to pass through glass into some unseen void. My reflection mimicked me perfectly now, but the faint sense of wrongness lingered, like the air had thickened just around me. I backed away, heart thumping loudly in my chest, and returned to the living room, hoping the comfort of my friends would erase the fear creeping through me. But even as I laughed at their jokes, I couldn't shake the sense that I was being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every soft thump from upstairs, made my stomach twist. The warmth of the room felt like a thin veil over something darker lurking just beyond sight. Then I saw it at the far end of the hallway, just past the doorway. A shadow moved, quick, silent. It didn't flicker or waver with the light. It was solid, deliberate, and it vanished the moment I blinked. My throat tightened, and I forced myself to breathe slowly, trying to convince myself that I had simply misseen the curtain or a coat hanging in the hall. But I knew deep down it was something else, something that didn't belong. I wanted to tell someone, but no one noticed. Their attention was fully absorbed by the movie, their laughter echoing in the cozy room. I sat on the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, and tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was my imagination, fueled by too many scary stories online, too many whispers from friends who love to exaggerate. I told myself over and over that I was safe, that the house was familiar, and that I was being silly. But the shadow wasn't gone. Every time I dared to glance toward the hallway, it seemed closer. It lingered just past the doorway, a dark stain against the light, watching silently. My stomach sank, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. For the first time that night, I truly felt alone, even in the midst of laughter and chatter. And as I sat there, heart hammering, I realized the horrifying thought I couldn't shake. Whatever it wasn't waiting for me to notice, it had been waiting for me to look. By the time the clock struck 11, the energy in the room had shifted. The laughter and chatter that had filled the evening felt distant, almost forced. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed while I was paying attention. Shadows seemed to cling more tightly to the corners, stretching unnaturally across the walls. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that maybe I was overthinking the way the dim light hit the furniture, but it didn't help. My skin prickled and my stomach churned in a mix of nerves and anticipation, the way it always did when a scary story felt just a little too real. I stayed close to the others, hoping proximity would calm me. Every creak of the floorboards or tap of a branch against the window made me flinch. The house, once warm and inviting, now felt oppressive. I felt eyes on me constantly, though I knew it was impossible. I tried to laugh along with the group, but even their jokes sounded hollow. My mind kept wandering back to the hallway mirror, to the shadow I had seen lurking there, and the memory of that fleeting wrong blink chilled me to the bone. Then I heard it whisper, soft, almost imperceptible but deliberate. It wasn't a word, not anything I could understand, just a long, dragging sound that seemed to echo from the hallway. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, straining to hear better. The whisper repeated, closer this time, as if the sound was moving toward me. I wanted to call out, to tell someone what I was hearing, but the words caught in my throat. When I turned to look at my friends, they were engrossed in the movie, oblivious to everything except the flickering images on the screen. Curiosity mingled with fear, pulling me toward the hallway. I tiptoed slowly, trying to convince myself it was nothing, a trick of the house settling, or a shadow cast by the light from the living room. Each step I took made my stomach tighten, and the whisper seemed to circle me, growing more urgent. I reached the doorway and paused, heart hammering in my chest. The hallway stretched into darkness, and the air felt colder here, icy against my skin. My reflection in the mirror at the end of the hall caught my eye, and for a moment, I almost gasped. Tiny handprints pressed against the glass. Not on the surface where someone could touch from this side, but behind it, trapped inside, smeared in a way that made my stomach flip. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the mirror, and the whisper seemed to hiss right next to my ear. I jerked back, nearly losing my balance. My mind raced. Who or what could leave handprints behind a mirror? It didn't make sense. My rational mind screamed that it was impossible, that maybe it was condensation, a trick of the light. But the fear in my chest refused to listen. I retreated back into the living room, trying to act normal, to force myself to forget what I had seen. But the sense of being watched didn't leave. Every time I glanced toward the hallway, I thought I saw shapes moving just beyond the light. I couldn't sit still, couldn't relax. Even the familiar walls of the house felt alien, the shadows stretching and twisting in ways that made no sense. I felt like something was circling me, waiting for me to let my guard down. Then I heard it again, the whisper, louder now, coming from just beyond the doorway. This time I could make out the faintest hint of a voice, childlike but distorted, dragging the sound along the floor like it had weight. I stumbled backward, my mind screaming at me to run, but my feet felt heavy, almost glued to the carpet. I wanted to call for someone, but the sound of the whisper drowned my voice, filling my ears, making my head spin. I clenched my eyes shut, telling myself to breathe, to stay calm. When I opened them again, the handprints in the mirror were gone. I blinked, hoping it had been a trick, a moment of hysteria. But then, a pale face appeared behind the glass, fleeting, just for a second, before vanishing into darkness. My chest heaved, my hands trembling as I stumbled back into the room, and I sank to the floor, pressing my back against the couch. My heart felt like it would burst from my chest. I told myself it was impossible, that it had to be a hallucination brought on by nerves and excitement. But the whisper continued, soft and persistent, threading its way through the house like a snake, reaching into every corner. And as I sat there, frozen and afraid, I realized something I couldn't deny. Whatever was in this house wasn't waiting for anyone else, it was waiting for me. By midnight, the house had changed completely. The laughter and energy that had filled the evening were gone, replaced by a heavy, suffocating quiet that pressed down on me from all sides. Even the lights seemed dimmer now, shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. I tried to tell myself it was the late hour, that my imagination was running wild, but every instinct in my body screamed that something was wrong. The warmth of the living room had vanished, replaced by a chill that crawled beneath my skin, leaving goosebumps in its wake. I stayed close to the others, pretending to watch the movie, pretending to laugh at the jokes, but my mind was elsewhere. Every sound, the soft creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, even the gentle whoosh of air from the vent made my heart leap. And then I noticed it. The shadows weren't just on the walls anymore. They moved differently, stretching across the carpet toward me, curling at the edges like fingers reaching out to grab. I forced myself to look away, telling myself I was imagining it, but the sense of being watched was unbearable. I needed to see, to know what was there. My feet carried me toward the hallway despite every ounce of fear screaming at me to stay put. The whispering had returned, soft and faint, circling me from the darkness beyond the doorway. I stepped closer, and it grew louder, like a breath just behind my ear, moving with me as though it could anticipate my every motion. The hallway seemed longer than it had before, stretching into a darkness that no light could touch. That's when I saw it. Standing at the end of the hallway, just beyond the doorframe, was a shape, thin, impossibly tall, with limbs that bent at wrong angles, and a head that tilted in a way no human should be able to. I froze, unable to move or breathe properly, staring at it as if looking away would make it disappear. Its eyes, or at least the dark hollows where eyes should have been, glimmered faintly in the dim light, reflecting something in me that I didn't want to acknowledge. The air around it was colder than ice, biting at my skin and making my teeth chatter. I tried to step back, but my legs refused to obey. I stumbled, falling hard onto the carpet, my hands scraping against the floor as I tried to scramble away. But when I looked up, the figure had moved closer, impossibly fast, yet silently. It didn't walk like a person. It glided, hovering just above the ground as though gravity itself feared it. My chest felt tight, and panic clawed at my throat, making it hard to breathe. I forced my eyes toward the wall, hoping to find some clue, some ordinary object that would prove my mind was playing tricks, but the wall was smeared with something wet and dark. Letters carved deep enough to catch the dim light. Stay. My stomach lurched, and a cold sweat broke out across my skin. Whoever or whatever was here wasn't hiding anymore. It wanted me to know it was in control. The whispering became voices then, soft but urgent, echoing from the hallway in a chorus of distorted, childlike tones. They were calling me, dragging at me, promising things I couldn't name. I tried to cover my ears, tried to block them out, but it was no use. The voices had a weight, pressing against my skull, burrowing into my thoughts, making it impossible to think clearly. I screamed silently, wishing anyone would notice, but the others were still glued to the movie, oblivious. I curled into a ball, trembling, trying to make myself as small as possible. The figure didn't approach any further, it didn't need to. Its presence filled the room entirely, suffocating me in darkness and dread. I caught a glimpse of movement at the edge of my vision, more shapes gathering in the hallway, twisted silhouettes I couldn't fully comprehend. Some were tall, like the first, and some were smaller, crouching, reaching, waiting. I realized, with a sickening clarity, that the pale hand I had seen behind the mirror was among them, and then it did something I'll never forget. It leaned its head forward, tilting even farther than possible, and for the briefest instant, I saw its face clearly. Hollow eyes, pale skin stretched too tight over bone, and a mouth frozen in a silent scream. It was staring at me, directly, and I felt its gaze pierce into my very soul. My knees went weak, and I collapsed fully onto the floor, gasping for air, my vision swimming with fear. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. The shadows retreated, the air warmed slightly, and the hallway seemed to return to normal. My chest heaved as I struggled to breathe, my hands shaking uncontrollably. But the sense of wrongness didn't leave. I knew it wasn't gone. It had only retreated, waiting for the moment I let my guard down, waiting for me to notice it again. And as I curled up in the corner of the living room, paralyzed by fear, I realized that this night was far from over. Whatever had come for me in the hallway wasn't finished. It had only begun. I couldn't sleep, even though the others had drifted off, the laughter and chatter replaced by soft snores and the occasional rustle of blankets. I stayed wide awake, pressed against the couch, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner. The room no longer felt safe. The warm, familiar glow of the lamps now seemed oppressive, casting shadows that writhed and stretched across the walls. Every sound, the gentle ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of the wind through the slightly open window felt amplified, deliberate, like the house itself was aware of my fear. I tried to tell myself it was over, that what I had seen in the hallway was just a hallucination born of nerves and imagination, but deep down, I knew better. I had felt the presence, seen it move, heard the whispers, and now, alone with the darkness creeping closer with every passing second, I understood that it wasn't satisfied with hiding in the hallway anymore. A soft creak on the stairs made my heart leap. I held my breath, straining to hear, but there was nothing else. I told myself it was probably just the house settling, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Something was out there, something patient, waiting for me to make a mistake. I tried to make myself small, to disappear beneath the blankets, but the fear clung to me like a second skin. Then I felt icy cold fingers brushing against my ankle. I froze, my stomach dropped, my throat went dry. My first instinct was to pull my leg back, to run, but I couldn't. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but deliberate. I forced myself to peek out from under the blanket, and I saw nothing at first. The room appeared normal, empty, still bathed in the soft glow of the lamp. And then I saw it kneeling in the corner of the room, just beyond the light. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, its dark, hollow eyes reflecting the faint lamp glow. My chest tightened and I felt like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't moving toward me. It didn't have to. Its presence filled the room, stretching into every corner, every shadow. And behind it, more shapes began to emerge, twisted silhouettes that seemed both human and not, crouching and waiting, some impossibly tall, others unnervingly small. I realized with horror that these were the same shadows I had glimpsed in the hallway, the ones that had followed me earlier. I wanted to scream, to alert my friends, but my voice caught in my throat. I couldn't even move. I was trapped in place, watching as the shadows shifted slowly, deliberately, like predators circling a cornered prey. The whispers returned, now louder, more insistent, threading their way through the room, weaving around me, burrowing into my thoughts. I could feel my mind unraveling, unable to separate reality from nightmare. One of the smaller shadows moved forward, and I realized with a sickening chill that it was holding something. A pale, tiny hand, pressed tightly in its grip. My stomach lurched, and I wanted to look away, to close my eyes, but I couldn't. The whispers rose to a crescendo, a chorus of distorted voices, dragging at me, pulling at my very thoughts. The room seemed to close in, the walls bending and stretching, the ceiling lowering. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears so loud it drowned everything else. Then the kneeling figure leaned forward, closer, until I could almost feel its breath. Its hollow eyes bore into me, unblinking, unrelenting. My hand shook, and I struggled to pull myself back, but my body refused. It was as if the shadows had claimed the space around me, anchoring me in place. I could see the small shapes moving toward me, surrounding me now, pressing in from all sides. And just as suddenly as it began, the pressure lifted. The shadows receded into the corners, the air warmed slightly, and the whispers dropped to faint murmurs. My chest heaved as I sank fully to the floor, trembling uncontrollably. I knew, though, that it wasn't gone. It had only pulled back for now, waiting for me to let my guard down, waiting for the moment when I might finally touch the mirror again, or look too long into the dark corners. As I pressed my knees to my chest, trying to catch my breath, I realized something far worse. The hand I had seen in the mirror, the same pale, trapped hand I had glimpsed earlier, it wasn't alone. The shadows were carrying it closer, and somehow, in that quiet, suffocating room, I could feel that hand reaching for me. I tried to will myself awake, to shake off the terror, but deep down, I knew I wasn't dreaming. Whatever was here, whatever had been waiting all night, wasn't done. It was coming closer, and this time, it wouldn't let me hide. Morning came, though I wouldn't call it relief. The sun streamed weakly through the curtains, painting the room in a warm golden glow that should have comforted me, but instead made the shadows seem sharper, more defined, as if they were retreating only to return later. The others were asleep, stretched across sleeping bags and blankets, snoring softly, oblivious to the terror that had unfolded in the dark hours before. My heart was still pounding, and my hands shook uncontrollably as I pressed them to my chest, trying to slow my breathing. I told myself it had been a nightmare, that my imagination had run wild, fueled by excitement, candy, and too many scary stories, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. I couldn't shake the sense that something in the house had followed me through the night, lingering unseen, waiting for me to notice. Every shadow in the room seemed to twitch as I moved, every corner threatening to give up some hidden horror. I tried to convince myself that the sunlight would chase it away, that light always meant safety. I crawled out of the blankets, my feet cold against the floor, and moved carefully toward the hallway mirror. My pulse raced, and I forced myself to look. The glass reflected the room behind me perfectly. Nothing unusual at first glance. No pale faces, no shadows lurking just out of sight. Relief flickered in me, small and fragile, but it didn't last. My eyes drifted to the corner, and I noticed something that made my stomach turn. There was a handprint on my pillow, pale and smudged, pressed into the fabric as if someone or something had rested there recently. My breath caught in my throat. It was small, childlike, delicate, and impossible, fresh, not old, not faded. My heart pounded so violently I felt it in my throat. I knelt down, running my fingers lightly over the mark, half expecting it to vanish when I touched it, but it didn't. I jumped back, stumbling over a blanket, my mind racing. The others slept on, unaware, while I felt the full weight of the night pressing down on me. I knew with a chilling certainty that whatever had been in the house had never truly left. It had stayed with me, hidden in the daylight, waiting for the right moment to make its presence undeniable. I turned back toward the hallway, the mirror at the end catching my reflection in the sunlight. I stared at myself, trembling, hoping, praying that it was only me, that the fear in my eyes was all that would meet my gaze. But then, behind my reflection, I saw it, another face, pale and featureless, pressed against the glass, eyes hollow, staring. I jerked backward, my hands flying to my mouth, but the figure didn't move. It didn't need to. Its presence alone filled the room with a cold, silent horror. My legs shook as I backed away, my mind screaming for logic, for reason, for something to make sense. But nothing could explain this. It was standing there, or perhaps inside the mirror, waiting for me, watching me. And as I watched, I realized something far worse. It wasn't alone. Behind it, more faces appeared, pressing against the glass, small hands reaching out as if through some invisible barrier. Trapped but relentless, I stumbled to the floor, curling into myself, trying to shut my eyes, trying to deny it. But even with my eyelids squeezed shut, I could feel them there. I could feel the weight of their gaze, the pull of their presence, and a suffocating cold wrapped around me. I understood then that the night hadn't ended, that whatever had haunted me in the dark had followed me into the day, invisible to everyone else, tethered to me, patient and relentless. When I dared to open my eyes again, the mirror looked normal at first, but the handprints on my pillow had multiplied, faint smudges appearing on the sheets and blankets as though the unseen visitors had moved through the room while I was looking. My stomach twisted, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I was frozen, paralyzed by terror, unable to escape the invisible chains of their presence. I backed into a corner, hugging my knees, my mind racing. And then I saw it just in the edge of my vision, a pale hand, pressing against the wall beside me, fingertips curling slowly as if it were reaching out. I froze, my heartbeat hammering in my ears, knowing that at any moment it could appear fully, step into the room, and claim me as it had claimed others before. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed, watching, waiting. All I know is that the sun rose higher, the house grew brighter, and yet I was still alone with them. The shadows of that night had not left. They were waiting, patient and hungry, and I understood with bone-deep certainty that this was only the beginning. Whatever had haunted my sleepover had found a way to stay, and I wasn't sure I would ever be free.